When an obscure band named Darlin first formed in 1992, it was extremely unsuccessful. An indie punk rock band in the middle of France consisting of 3 musicians new to the scene was probably never going to take off. They only have 2 official releases and never made a proper album. They even split up in 1993, only 6 months after their formation, going on to do other musical projects. But out of the 3 members, one Laurent Brankowitz went on to form a Grammy-winning chart-topping band named Phoenix, with their album Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix winning a Grammy for the Best Alternative Album of 2009, and their songs 1901 and Lithomania being performed on famous late-night shows and even being featured in the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, he's the least famous of the 3 members of Darlin. The other 2 members were Guy Manuel Homan Kiroshow and Thomas Bangalter, who went on to experiment with some synthesizers and drum beats together, but they needed a name, and no better name emerged from a criticism of Darlin's music and Melody Maker, where an unsuspecting critic called their music a combination of 2 words. These 2 words changed the scene of music forever. Daft Punk were formed during the year of 1993 and handed in their first demo of some of their noodling to one DJ Stuart McMillan at a rave at Euro Disney. These contents were later released on the single The New Wave from McMillan's indie label Soma Quality Recordings, founded by his band Slam. From there, Daft Punk slowly became an underground hit, with their second release Daft Punk becoming a house music sensation. After that, Daft Punk hired their manager Pedro Winter, who would frequently promote their music at nightclubs. Their popularity slowly developed into them receiving a lot of offers from different record companies wanting to sign them, which led them to signing to Virgin Records in September of 1996, in a smart play where both members were allowed to keep ownership of their tracks, licensing their music through their production company Daft Tracks as to keep their musical freedom. Daft Punk would continue playing at venues throughout 1996 with no masks, and would gain reputation for blending different styles of genres, specifically genres of house music, during their sets while using vinyl records from their personal collection. This eventually led to their 1997 debut Homework, a collection of different styles of house music housed into one album done in their home studio, hence the name Homework. Daft Punk originally had planned to release all these songs as a bunch of singles, but they had made so much material that they figured to make an album instead. Personally, I think this album is great. Not exactly everyone's cup of tea, as a lot of the songs are overly harsh and better played at a club rather than in your headphones, but the songs are great. Around the World has always been the best song on the album personally, by far, but other songs like Fresh, Daft Punk, Alive, and almost every other song on this album deserve praise as well. The album received critical praise, with it being noted as a very solid house album while also blending in a lot of genres, reminiscing of the Chicago and French house styles, along with punk, acid house, and techno music. The only real criticism it got was for sounding amateurish, and while it does shine a little bit throughout the album, it's all part of the appeal for most people. From the release of their album, they embarked on the Daft and Direct tour, which led on for an entire year, which involved them touring around the US and other countries, and this took them to new heights and new places. And while they were going in new places, Daft Punk decided to try something new. After the tour ended, Daft Punk mostly focused on their own music labels, while also beginning work on a DVD collection for their music videos for Homework, which was released on the 28th of March 2000, under the title Daft, a story about dogs, androids, firemen, and tomatoes. All of the music videos are pretty good, and I'd highly recommend you check them out. But during all of this time during 1998 onwards, Daft Punk were actually working on their second studio album, and during those sessions they tried something completely different. In a horrible accident on September 9th, 1999, at 9:09 a.m., a sampler in their home studio exploded, and both band members woke up to them being robots. I mean, of course that's not true, but this is due to something Thomas and Manuel had been thinking about for a while. Thomas and Manuel's philosophy with their music hadn't always involved them with their faces obscured. During their early days, they wouldn't obscure their faces much, but nearing the end of 1996 and the beginning of their tour for Homework, they'd start to wear Halloween masks during performances and interviews, so people could focus on the music and not the people behind them. This also helps with their anonymity. This developed into what we now know as the iconic Stone Cold robot masks of Daft Punk. The helmets during this era had a full-on LED panel that could be controlled to make different patterns and phrases, accompanied by a huge battery of a backpack to power everything. This resulted in a spectacle of the eye to look at. I mean, come on, look at these things. The helmets originally had hair on them, but before the first interview where they'd unveil these new designs, they ripped the hair out, going for a more sleek look. Fun fact, these helmets reportedly cost $65,000 to make, but I guess it was worth it for the look. Crap, I went off track with a tangent about their helmets, and I don't know how to transition smoothly back into something else. Guess I'll just cut. After making a couple house tracks in the latter half of 1998, one being Too Long, which later appears on their second album, Daft Punk realized that they really didn't want to do house music anymore. Apparently Manuel reported that everyone was trying to do what they were doing and wanted to try something new. They wanted to try something different. And different is what they did. For 3 years, they toiled on this album of theirs, paying homage to the music that they grew up with in the 70s and 80s, and paving new roads for electronic music. The fruits of their labor were beginning to show when the 13th of November of the year 2000 rolled around. A little song Daft Punk had worked on during these album sessions was pulled out, dusted, and released under the name of One More Time. This song is a 5-minute French house number with a clear celebration of pop and 70s music. It's funky, it's groovy, you can dance to it, and damn, it's good. The vocals of Rob Anthony, combined with the celebratory beat and heavy autotune, makes it nothing short of a dance masterpiece. And if Daft Punk and Around the World were the songs to kick their career off, One More Time shot them into the skyline. It hit number 1 in multiple countries, and by the end of the year was certified platinum in the UK and gold in 6 different countries. Daft Punk then released their website Daft Club, which will be relevant later, but this will go under the radar for now. This was overshadowed completely by the release of their second album, Discovery. Critics loved it, fans loved it, and it's universally acclaimed as one of the best electronic albums ever made, along with one of the best albums of the 21st century. But before we get into this, I want to discuss sampling. Sampling is essentially taking one piece of audio and reusing it in a different context. This trend started during the early days of hip-hop and slowly became mainstream in rap and other music. And while Homework does contain some sampling, Discovery had them go ham on the samples. Essentially every single track on this album has at least one sample. This album holds a very consistent tone despite having very different songs. The main tie-in is the groove of the 70s and 80s, along with a lot of synths, sampling, and disco influence. Songs like Digital Love, a cheesy romance ballad straight out of the Hall & Oates discography, works well with the aggressive hair metal guitar of Aerodynamic, the walking bass line of Voyager, the laid-back synths and melancholy vocals of Something About Us, and the danciness of songs like High Life and Too Long. And all the songs, at least most of them, work both with the album and on their own, besides the obvious Night Vision that just kind of fills up space. And that's what I like about this album. It's that you don't need to listen to the full album to get the whole context of these songs. You can play basically any one of these at any time and it'd still work. The songs themselves, besides being bangers, feature something new to Daft Punk. Lyrics. Of course, every band has to start off with repeating Around the World 144 times, but I guess Daft Punk wanted to try something new, incorporated more voice box, robot, and guest singers. There isn't much to write home lyrically, most of the songs with lyrics on this album being One More Time, Digital Love, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, technically, Something About Us, Face to Face, and Too Long, are either about love or dance. And that's just the 80s influence crawling up on them, I'd assume. The instrumentals are also fabulous. Even by just listening to the isolated instrumentals, you can get a vibe from the track alone. Standout tracks on this album for me are One More Time, Aerodynamic for that absolutely legendary guitar solo and groovy bass line, Digital Love for the instrumentals, riff, and singing, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger purely for the orgasmic feeling you get of hearing the entire lyrical bar being spoken out of this voice box at the end. Like, just listen to it. Something About Us for just being damn powerful and good, soft singing, and a distinct choking sound in the background that I'm a fan of. And Face to Face for just being kick-ass in its sampling and instrumentals. But yeah, Discovery is a damn good album. Damn great even. And the critics certainly understood that, except for Pitchfork, because Pitchfork doesn't understand anything. In terms of charts and sales, Discovery held number 1 in multiple countries and sold platinum in multiple as well. Early CD releases of Discovery also contained a little access card to that Daft Club website I mentioned earlier, where fans could access fan remixes and other goodies, along with a live 1997, a 45-minute segment of Daft Punk's live set at Birmingham's Quake Club during their Daft and Direct tour. People like this one too, I guess. You may be wondering, Kiro, why are you playing these clips of blue aliens or humans in the background while you're talking? And your answer to that question lies in what Daft Punk released after Discovery. See, early on in the sessions for making Discovery, the duo began toying around with a concept film to go with this album. They wanted to make something sort of sci-fi that blended with the ideas of the entertainment industry with some pretty dark themes of oppression. However, they rewrote the idea over and over again in style for the film before settling on the style of Leiji Matsumoto, a childhood hero of theirs and someone that fit the idea of sci-fi in the music industry. Via some connections at Toshiba, they managed to get the project started in 2000 and painstakingly had to translate orders from French to Japanese. They managed to get the movie idea done, writing the script, going to Tokyo nearly once a month, and getting these people on screen to help work on the film, before finally finishing in April of 2003. The name of this film is Interstellar 555. The movie is utterly void of dialogue and has barely any other sounds other than the entire Discovery album playing to soundtrack it all. This also helps with making music videos for the song's release and airing on programs like Toonami. The first 4 songs/episodes of the film were aired during the latter half of 2001 on Toonami, coincidentally alongside with Gorillaz. Funny how that works out sometimes. Anywho, the film was completed and released to Daft Club in December of 2003, with it receiving mostly positive reviews from critics. It's funny how 2 robots can write a better plot for a movie than Marvel or Star Wars nowadays. I'm not someone who's good at deeply analyzing themes in movies, their character and whatnot, but I can say that this movie is definitely worth a watch. It's an hour long, the plot doesn't drag too much, it's a pretty good watch and it keeps you on your toes for most of it. There isn't any slowness to it. Some things don't really go explained, but that doesn't really bother or affect the film. It's a fun watch and you can watch it for free using the music videos for the songs on YouTube. Just play them in order of the Discovery track list and then you should get the full story. The animation's good, the soundtrack is god tier, plot is decent, and it's a must watch if you're a Daft Punk fan, and it holds nostalgia for me, as I remember watching it when I was 6 and I was sitting on my yada yada yada, you came here for a retrospective, not my life ramblings. Point is, watch the film. Go. Do it now. Are you done watching the film? I don't know if you're done watching the film, I'm not psychic, and I can't force you to watch a film. After Interstellar 5555, Daft Punk just kinda relaxed for a bit. Sure, they released some remix album that no one likes, but that's kind of it for now. And 2004 was mostly relaxation until September. Daft Punk then decided to do something completely different again. Human After All, the third Daft Punk studio album, was released on the 14th of March 2005. It was the result of a forced, very limited time constraint set by Thomas and Manuel, the equivalent of a Great British Bake Off for an album. 6 weeks of total time were spent on the album, 4 weeks were spent on mixing, so 2 weeks to lay out the entire musicality, sampling, and melody of an entire album. No big deal. You may be asking, why did I cut out all of this build-up for the album this time? Well, it's because Daft Punk didn't do any. They made the album in 6 weeks, shot a few music videos, did no interviews to promote the album, and then just released it. The album itself is very unlike anything in Daft Punk's discography up to that point. It's a little bit if like Homer became emo and edgy. It's dark, it's growling, it's bitter, and it's designed to not go down well. Almost every song, spare a few, have rough, nauseous synths, straight drum machines, some guitar work, and barked vocoder lines. The album was considered so weird and so out of left field for Daft Punk. When it was leaked months before release, people thought it was a prank from Daft Punk to foil online file sharing. And yeah, this album is relatively controversial in terms of the Daft Punk discography. You either will adore this album and every single track, or you will hate most of the album. I can certainly understand both perspectives because all in all, this album is a mix of both. There are songs that I love on the album, Human After All, Prime Time of Your Life, Emotion, Make Love. These are all great songs that do help raise this album. And then there are songs that are more gritty. Steam Machine, The Brainwasher, and Television Rules the Nation. Then there is the best song on the album, On Off. The album's themes are a lot more dark. To give you an idea, the album was inspired by 1984. Yes, that one. It's literally 1984! Lots of stuff relating to the media being a villain, looking at technology negatively, life, and being human after all. It's frustrating, really, since on one hand, this album is what's needed in Daft Punk's discography, a sense of dread, a dark album. And some of the songs aren't bad, but on the other hand, it's a rushed mess that doesn't feel complete and has some awkward, drawn-out moments, and the reviews and sales reflect that. It's a very, very mixed bag, and that kinda describes Human After All. There was also a remix album released exclusively for Japan that just wasn't released worldwide until 9 years later in 2014, which was weird, I guess. It was also mediocre and proves that nobody can remix a Daft Punk song. After this album, Daft Punk went and released another movie, Electroma. This one, instead of being animated, is live action, and like Human After All, it's gritty, it's depressing, it's dark, it's cold. The general plot is very minimal. It's 60 minutes long, and those 60 minutes are avant-garde as all hell, and cold in general, just cold. Overall, the themes of it are mostly robotic. It follows the story of these two robots discovering that they can't be human, no matter how hard they try. And it ends with this. It's a good movie for sure, and I'd recommend it to any Daft Punk fan, but it's not a happy trip. Is it better than Interstellar 5555? No. But is it bad? Also, no. First screenings of the movie reportedly came out negative, but over time it gained a cult following, and a small love from the people who watched it. Similar to the album A Human After All, it's very philosophical in its ideas about what it's like to be a robot versus being a human, and struggling to find the humanity of being a robot and how humanity is like being a robot in a way. So this era of Daft Punk seems rather bleak, like Daft Punk are slowly descending into mediocrity and weirdness, down the downward spiral. But then, hope appeared. In case you haven't noticed, I haven't mentioned anything about them doing tours since that 1997 Daft & Direct tour that I skimmed over a couple minutes ago. This is because they hadn't done any, but now that changes. They decided to go on tour again for most of 2006 and 2007, but they'd be doing something different. First off, they weren't setting up in front of amateur DJ setups anymore, they had a set piece. And this they developed in near secret, with it only really being unveiled when the tour started. And holy crap, based off of the set piece alone, this tour is amazing. An LED triangle wall lined up with thousands of LEDs, an aluminum pyramid where the control center was, and this pyramid lined up with LEDs, and it's like a TV screen, and you get these amazing 3D visuals, and you can see Daft Punk in the center, and they're controlling the songs and the vibing, and they're just having a good time. And it's just, the songs from their discography were remixed live by them, and it proved two things. One, Human After All is a respectable album, and people started nodding and appreciating the album more. 2. The only people that can remix Daft Punk songs are Daft Punk. And this tour received something Daft Punk needed desperately: rave reviews. This tour and subsequent concerts part of this tour have unironically been hailed as some of the best concerts ever put on. And I agree. And the live album they released for this, Alive 2007, because you know it's 10 years after Alive 1997, which recorded their concert from the Accor Arena in Paris, was so goddamn light that it received a Grammy for the Best Electronic Album of 2008. I mean, to be fair, they were going up against some pretty stiff competition, but like still. This baby helped see the potential and sheer scale of what Daft Punk could do. They could make a mediocre album great again. They could remix their own songs. They could put on an amazing tour. And what could they have done after this? Well, besides performing at the 2008 Grammys with Kanye West because Kanye sampled Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger in his song Stronger, they were announced at the San Diego Comic-Con of 2009 to have scored 24 tracks for the film Tron Legacy. It was clear to Daft Punk that this was a tall order coming from Human After All. To quote, "We knew from the start that there was no way we were going to do this film score with 2 synthesizers and a drum machine." But Daft Punk did their job, and this more cinematic approach helped plant a little seed in their head for an album. The film score was released on December 3rd, 2010, and it was generally liked by audiences. I don't really have much to say about this score, since, yeah, it's a film score, I'm not really into those. It's a great one, arguably better than the movie itself, but I don't know, I've just never had a particular nostalgia or liking to this album. Maybe to some fans it's the greatest work, and I respect that, but I don't really know about it myself, Chief. Sound is cinematic, as you'd probably expect from a film score. It's probably exactly what you're envisioning if I were to tell you the phrase, electronic string score from Daft Punk. A bit vaporwave-ish, but overall, it's not bad. Wouldn't recommend it much, but it's still pretty good. It's a solid decent out of 10. But this cinematic project left a little seed in Daft Punk's mind. And this would fester for a while, until something sprouted. And out of it came something legendary, the best thing they've ever made. And that was the Tron Legacy remix album. Yeah, baby, they did a third one! No, just joking, this remix album is not good, as with the other remix albums they released. What really came was this. Before the recording of Tron's soundtrack, Daft Punk had spent a bit of time working on new songs for themselves, before ultimately feeling a bit dissatisfied with the process of sampling and looping, so they moved on to Tron. And this was a breath of fresh air for them. They came back to these demos after Tron with a new mindset and got to work in utter secret. They invited some guest stars, specifically Nile Rodgers, the guy on guitar for the band Chic, and Giorgio Moroder, the crowned father of disco and electronic music. These updates were sporadically reported on between 2010 and 2012, and fans had no idea where they were going with this. But we now know that Daft Punk wanted to quit the sampling and do something new, again, and there's only one place to go when you don't want to sample other work. you sample yourself. Session musicians were all brought in secret to record live samples for Daft Punk to use, and Giorgio Moroder, who I mentioned earlier, was told to simply just tell his life story. Orchestral tracks were reportedly recorded for each song, which you can see came over from the Tron Legacy soundtrack. And so, Daft Punk toiled for years in the studio, in private, and on analog recording equipment as well. This basically means no computers, no drum machines, all analog, all like they recorded in the 70s, to help aid the sound that Daft Punk were going for. And what they were doing in the studio started to show. Promotion began everywhere, from billboards on the road to a 15-second advertisement on SNL. And then they released Get Lucky, which, yeah, if you haven't heard Get Lucky, then you probably did not ever live through 2013. It went through number 1, it's damn funky, it's damn good. Has Pharrell Williams on it, you know it, you've heard it. May 17th, 2013. The day Random Access Memories, their 4th studio album, was released. Damn! Damn! This album is amazing. It's a masterpiece even. I could have spent the entire runtime of this video discussing how great this album is, and probably even longer. But I don't want this video to be too long, so in short, this album is the best produced album of the 21st century, single-handedly brought disco back into the public eye again, was critically acclaimed and loved by basically everyone, won 5 Grammys including Album of the Year, and overall was just amazing and one of the best albums that I've ever heard and the best album that they've ever released. Okay, let's calm down. First off, the production. Now, I don't know about you, but mixing and production of a song in general is what makes it or breaks it. Some songs can be boring as all hell, but benefit from sounding great, while some have the foundation for greatness but fall short because it's hard to listen to. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Cream. Daft Punk nailed the production on this one. Every single sound, whir, buzz, honk, stroke, and bang can be heard on this. It's a sleek, industrial fighter jet of an album and an unbelievably smooth album. None of the sounds on here sound bad, no matter if they have 250 plus audio tracks like Touch does. Get Lucky and Lose Yourself to Dance are incredibly funky and danceable. Touch and Giorgio by Moroder feel larger than life, and in between there are so many gems. Fragments of Time, Motherboard, The Game of Love, Give Life Back to Music, Within. And the send-off of the album, the finale, Contact, is the only way that they could have ended this album. Don't at me. It feels like a proper end to the album. Some people argued that the songs are a little bit repetitive and long, and Daft Punk became a little bit more self-absorbent. But for me, that's not an issue. This album is one to dance to. It's a bop. I'm not complaining about how long Lose Yourself to Dance is because I'm too busy dancing to it. And the lyrics are also a lot better this time around. Simple, sleek, elegant. This entire album as a concept is similar to that of Discoveries in that it's a celebration of the past and the sound that they grew up with. But this album is more about the human spirit and drawing connections to the robot and human, comparing the human's capacity for storing memories as a hard drive, or random access memories. Also, you know, it's about dancing. A lot of dance, and love, and dance, and basically what disco was about. But overall, I can't point to a single song here being bad, besides maybe Doing It Right. Everybody will be dancing to me doing. But even then, I don't skip it if it comes on. And the album bringing back disco, well, that's all there is to say. It made disco cool again, after it died in a puddle during the 90s and 2000s. 4-on-the-floor rhythms, walking bass, chicken scratch guitar, synths, and lyrics of dance and love all can be found on this album. Critical acclaim? Check, went to number 1 in multiple countries and sold amazingly. Absolutely killing it at the Grammys? Check. They did a live performance and they got Paul McCartney jamming to their tune. If you got Paul McCartney dancing to your tune, you know you have a good tune. And overall, this album is amazing. Nothing else I can say. Just listen to it, start to finish. Just stop watching this video and listen to it. Okay, you're back. And you might probably be thinking, well, what could have Daft Punk done to top after that? I mean, it's just been topping after topping themselves. I mean, what could they do? Nothing. Sure, they released some interview tapes about the making of Ram that I highly recommend, but that's about it for this album. So what did they do afterwards then? They did help produce Kanye's Yeezus album in 2014, created 2 other number 1 hits, being The Weeknd's I Feel It Coming and Starboy in 2016, set up a random pop-up shop in 2017, and they performed at the Grammys for The Weeknd songs I Feel It Coming and Starboy that I mentioned earlier, wrote and produced some Australian band song, and come 2021, fans of Daft Punk are kinda starved for new content. And February 22nd rolls around, and we get an upload on the Daft Punk channel, a notification. Is it new music? Is it an announcement for an album? No. That day, Daft Punk announced that they were splitting up. They didn't give a reason, but being in the music business for 28 years is a long time. A clip from Electroma plays, and touch blasts into the background as a sunset is shown, and then something comes on, 1993 to 2021. It's the robot hands touching each other in the triangle, and oh my god, I'm not crying. That's it. That's that. That's the end. End of story. Period. Done. Finito. It's only respectable, you know, letting Daft Punk go out without much fanfare or announcement besides one video, and not going on and on like some bands do. It would have been interesting to see how they could have continued and experimented with music, but personally I don't think they could have ever topped Random Access Memories. We got what we wanted, we got what we needed, and they kinda left before they went down into the downward spiral. Two guys making good music for us to dance to. And their legacy stands. They are considered one of the most influential duos of all time and the most influential band in all of electronic music. And that is the story of Daft Punk.